We are living in unprecedented times at the moment, in the middle of a global pandemic. And many of us have been in lockdown in the last few months to help control and limit the spread of coronavirus. And restrictions are being lifted slowly, so life is far from normal. And truth is, even though we live in a country with really good access to healthcare provided by the NHS, even though medicine has made massive advances over the decades, we simply have no cure for the virus. There is no vaccine. And people get sick and they suffer. And as an A&E doctor myself, I've found myself incredibly limited in the care that I've been able to provide to patients suffering with COVID-19. I found myself only able to support them with oxygen or with ventilation, or if they've been well enough, to send them home to self-isolate, to let their body fight the disease, because we have no cure. Coronavirus has shown us all that healthcare staff have limits when it comes to treating patients with COVID-19. But Jesus, God's chosen king, was a man in history who walked this earth over 2,000 years ago who had no limits. And it was shown in the last video by his power over creation and the forces of nature, calming a storm with mere words. And in the book of Mark in the Bible, we'll see the second bit of evidence that proves that Jesus is God's chosen king as he shows his power over sickness. In Mark chapter 5, Jesus encounters a woman who is sick. And from verse 25, Mark writes, "And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse." 12 years this woman had a chronic bleeding disorder. Despite being treated with many doctors, she didn't get better, she got worse. And as a doctor, I can testify that a lot of our caseload is people suffering with chronic diseases. And despite all our training, resources, medicine, knowledge, despite all of that, there are many conditions for simply which we don't have a cure. We're only able to manage patients' symptoms and people continue to suffer. Healthcare professionals have their limits, but not with Jesus. Mark writes, verse 27, "When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, 'If I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed.' Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering." At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. Another amazing supernatural event in history in this eyewitness account that cannot be explained by modern medicine or human reason. Suffering and struggling with a chronic bleeding disorder for 12 years, this woman touched the clothes of Jesus and she was healed immediately. I've never encountered any healthcare professional who the patient has simply touched their shirt or scrubs or white coat and they've been healed. Simply doesn't happen because it's impossible for man. But not so with Jesus. And this is one of the many healing miracles that Mark records for us. Right from the beginning, Jesus has been healing. So in chapter 1, he heals many, and a man with leprosy simply by being touched. In chapter 2, he heals a paralysed man simply by speaking. In chapter 3, he heals a man with a withered hand. All these supernatural healing miracles help us answer the question, who is Jesus? He's more than a man who lived and walked over 2,000 years ago. He's God's chosen king. And how do we know this? Well, it's because he was able to do things only God can do. Healing the woman and many others by being touched, as we've seen in this video. Jesus reveals he is God's chosen king. And he demonstrates this. He proves it by his power over sickness.